All right, hello. Now that you have begun Ishmael, we're going to try to crank through a handful of differing sections and I think some really important takeaways here. Um, so, where you had finished off from last week was through the first chapter, and again, your assignment over the weekend was to look at the story about Kurt and Hans and whether or not perhaps maybe there was something that maybe you feel that you've been lied to, right? And if it matters as it relates to knowledge, as it relates to kind of the world within which we live, reality, etc. Okay? And so now where we're taking up is where we're picking up rather is where the narrator goes back for a second visit, and and so this is where we're going to go. So I'm in chapter 2, section 1. I'm going to try to breeze through a bunch of this, even though I think it's very, very rich. So keeping in mind that Ishmael claims Ishmael claims that in particular what he teaches is the subject of captivity. Okay? And so using the Kurt and Hans example, using the Kurt and Hans story, what Ishmael sets up and what Ishmael asks is, well, how did he get so many people to listen to his story? Right? Or how did he hold so many people captive? I just kind of jumped ahead. He held so many people captive because he read, or he spoke of, he broadcast a story, right? What was it that held them captive? I'm on page 34. What he had to tell them was a story, right? He said, I'm telling you this because the people of your culture are in much the same situation like the people of Nazi Germany. They are captives of a story. I sat there blinking for a while. I know of no such story. I told him at least. Okay. And the narrator seems perplexed by this for the fact that, if I were to say, well, what's the story of our culture? Thinking about kind of Western ideas, Western idealism, we probably really wouldn't think of much. We'd probably say, there's nothing like that, right? And that's what the narrator says. So Ishmael says, there's no need to hear of it. There's no need to name it or discuss it. Every one of you knows it by heart by the time you're 6 or 7, and you hear it incessantly, because every medium of propaganda, every medium of education pours it out incessantly. You hear it incessantly, and you don't need to listen to it. There's no need to listen to it. It's always humming away in the background, so there's no need to attend to it at all. In fact, you'll find, at least initially, that's hard to attend to. It's like the humming of a distant motor. It never stops because the sound's no longer becomes a sound that's no longer heard at all. Okay? And what Ishmael is getting at here is the idea that the story by which we're all enacting, the story that we're all partaking in, we don't recognize. We have become blind to it because we've heard it over and over and over and over again. Right? And so kind of lulls us to sleep or lulls us to numbness. Okay? And this is in particular that which is telling the story, Ishmael claims, is called mother culture. And so that's going to be a phrase that we're going to encounter the next little bit, okay, throughout the book, is mother culture. Blah, 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 blah. All right, skipping ahead here. We get introduced in section 3, chapter 2, the term takers and leavers, okay? And most closely associated here, takers are those that are civilized, leavers those that are primitive. Okay, so again, this will become more clear as the book goes on, but takers and leavers. Okay, all right. Section 4. Okay. All right, and this is the first time really in section 4 that we get this close connection, or we get this focus on the question how things came to be this way. And that is going to be a very, very important question for us, for this course, as we engage with the book as well. Okay, of thinking about how things came to be this way. That if I were to ask you, student 2019 belief in reality, how did things come to be this way? How did things come to be this way? In what way, in what system, in what kind of capacity, why is it that we're living the life that we're living? Why are we living the way that we're living? Why do we interact the way that we interact? Why do we eat what we eat? Why do we drive where we drive to? How did things come to be this way? Okay. And I'm on page 40. This is right before section 5. Mother Culture, whose voice has been in your ear since the day of your birth, has given you an explanation of how things came to be this way. You know it well. Everyone in your culture knows it well. But this explanation wasn't given to you all at once. No one ever sat you down and said, here are how things came to be this way, beginning with 10, 15 billion years ago, right up to the present. Rather, you assembled this explanation like a mosaic from millions of bits of information presented to you in various ways by others who share that explanation. You assembled it from table talk of your parents, the cartoons you watched on television, Sunday school, your textbooks, teachers, from broadcasts, from movies, novels, sermons, plays, newspapers, all the rest. Are you with me so far? I think so, the narrator replies. This explanation of how things came to be this way is ambient in your culture. Everyone knows it, and everyone accepts it without question. Okay. As we make our journey, we're going to be re-examining key pieces of that mosaic. We're going to be taking them out of your mosaic, fitting them together entirely a different mosaic, into an entirely different explanation of how things came to be this way. Okay? All right. So that's one of the main goals here, is thinking about how things came to be this way. Okay? Especially as it relates to Mother Culture, constantly murmuring in our ears. Okay? A couple of definitions in section 5. Story, which is a scenario interrelating humans, the world, and the gods. Second definition, to enact. To enact a story is to live to make it a reality. Okay, so when we enact a story, we're hoping to see that it becomes the case. And 3, culture. A culture is a people enacting a story. Okay? People enacting a story. Okay? So, you're saying the people of my culture are enacting their own story about humans, the world, and the gods. That's right. I still don't know what that story is, the narrator responds, but you will. Okay? So again, to enact, you see that something becomes the case. A story is a scenario interrelating humans, the world, and the gods, and a culture is a group of people enacting a story. Okay? He claims in section 6, when I say he, I mean Ishmael, guides the narrator to think about the fact that takers and leavers are enacting two very, very different stories. Okay? The leavers and the takers are enacting two separate stories based entirely different contradictory premises. This is something that we'll be looking at later, so you don't have to understand it right this second. Okay? So again, takers and leavers, Mother Culture. We have story enacting. We have story enacting culture. Okay, so all of these definitions, all of these kind of concepts that we'll return to again and again. Okay. All right. So now, what they are looking for. Okay. Blah blah blah. This is in section 7. So what we're looking for is an explanatory theory of how things came to be this way. Okay. They've been told an explaining story. They've been given an explanation of how things came to be this way, and this stills their alarm. Okay? It pacifies them. Okay. And so, kind of continuing on here, and this is on page 45, okay, where Ishmael asks the question, or Ishmael suggests, right, that maybe we need to start thinking mythologically. So what is our culture's myth surrounding how things came to be this way? And the narrator says, there's no myths, right? That's not a thing that exists. Okay. I'm talking about your culture's mythology, of course. I thought that was obvious. It was not obvious to me. Any story that explains the meaning of the world, the interrelation of the gods, and the destiny of humans is bound to be mythology. That may be so, right? But it's not like Greek mythology or Norse mythology. However, right, I'm talking about living mythology, not recorded in any book, but recorded in the minds of people of your culture and being enacted all over the world. Okay. All right. So, what's happening here is Ishmael is communicating with the narrator. This is right before chapter 3. Okay. And this is right before chapter 3. And Ishmael, by the end of it, is asking about our story or our culture's creation myth. Okay, thinking about it anthropologically. Okay. So, that's the end of chapter 2, where we have, again, this kind of focus on mother culture, the idea of takers and leavers, the notion of a story, an acting, and a culture. Okay, so kind of making sure that we have a pretty good grasp on that. And again, I'm not going wildly in depth here. I'm just kind of hopefully giving a bunch of the little pieces to take away from. Okay, and then we're going to dive into chapter 3.